Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 24th of April of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the massive missile strike that took place during the previous night. The Ukrainian sources published this video, and in this video we can see a lot of episodes how the Russians were bombing and attacking the capital of Ukraine, the city of Kiev, with a significant number of drones and missiles, of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. A lot of explosions, a lot of targets were damaged and destroyed, and of course there were casualties, and casualties were among civilians. Anyway, when talking about this video and when talking about all these episodes, I have just one question. Why the Russians decided to resume their attacks on the territory of Ukraine with a significant number of drones and missiles today on the 24th of April of 2025? I'll remind you that the last massive missile strike where the Russians were using drones and missiles and cruise missiles altogether took place in the end of December, basically on the night between the 24th and the 25th of December of 2024. So almost 4 months ago. I'm not saying that the Russians haven't been attacking Ukraine since that moment. I'm just trying to tell you that this is the first combined strike with so many missiles and so many drones at the same time. The Russians were bombing Ukraine in January, February, in March. There was a day when the Russians used up to 300 drones per one day to attack the territory of Ukraine. But the Russians didn't attack Ukraine using combined types of arms, combining missiles, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, drones, hypersonic missiles all together. So basically this is the first time since December of 2025, the first time for the previous 4 months. This is a very important detail, and this is another reason why I have this question, why the Russians decided to resume their attacks today. Another important detail about this massive missile strike, I'll remind you that on the 18th of March, there was a talk between the President of the United States of America and the President of the Russian Federation regarding ceasefire on attacks on the energy facilities. And I'll remind you that according to those talks and according to results of those talks, the Russians accepted and the Russians agreed to establish ceasefire on energy facilities. And Russian ceasefire ended by the 17th of April of 2025. And I would like to remind you also that Ukrainian ceasefire started on the 24th or 25th of March of 2025. So basically a month ago. So as you can see, the Russians also made this massive missile strike at the day when Ukrainian ceasefire on the Russian energy facilities ended. So we can see at least several reasons and several options, several interesting updates regarding this attack. Anyway, today we got another very important statement, very important article that was published by the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. Let's discuss this statement in details because this is very interesting. I'm not happy with the Russian strikes on Kiev. Not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done. So this is very important statement because we see that despite this statement, despite all these talks, we see that the United States of America, probably for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, after another Russian massive missile strike or drone strike, didn't announce additional military package to Ukraine. Because usually in the past, every time when the Russians attacked the territory of Ukraine, Joe Biden and Biden's administration announced additional military package. United States of America usually provide additional, let's say, package or additional Patriot system or additional missiles to Patriot systems, or the United States of America gave additional amount of money, additional billion to Ukraine and Zelensky to support its defense. And now we see that nothing like that happened. Another important thing that we see that Trump stated that he is unhappy, but he doesn't condemn this strike. He says that it is necessary, it is unnecessary. He says that it's not very good day, not very good timing to make these strikes. He doesn't say that don't do this. he said that it is very bad timing. So it's like, it sounds like you should have do this, but either before or later after this peace deal, or probably after this mineral deal or something like this. So very important statement. I'm just trying to tell you that this statement differs from statements and events that usually took place after another Russian massive missile strike. Now let's move further. We have additional details and let's discuss them. And first, let's talk about the Novopavlovka direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. We're going to talk about this area because, according to information we have, according to the report that was published by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, as a result of offensive operation, as a result of decisive actions of the group of forces center, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Bogdanovka. This is very important, and this is how the map has been changed for the previous, let's say, 24 hours. So, for example, this is the situation by the end of the 23rd of April of 2025, and this is the situation by the end of the 24th of April. So, as you can see, to get the Dnipro region, the Russians need to take under control just 3 villages: the village of Troitska, the village of Gorkova, and the village of Kotlarovka. And as for the village of Kotlarovka, according to several very reliable pro-Russian resources, as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to answer this village, and currently there are very heavy clashes. You know that this Dnipro direction or Novopavlovka direction is becoming very important these days, because we are entering probably, it's very difficult and hard to say this period of time very interesting, or because people are dying and soldiers are dying according to Trump 5,000 a week, but we are entering very not interesting, very special period of the special military operation. We are talking about the May's holidays, Victory Day, because usually since the beginning of the special military operation, both the Russians and the Ukrainians were trying to get some media victory before this date. And the Russians currently have 2 goals for the next 2 weeks. First goal and first media victory that the Russians are trying to get before, let's say, May holidays is to secure the Russian territory completely from Ukrainian soldiers. We're talking about the settlement of Oleshny, because we still continue receiving reports that there are still Ukrainian soldiers on the territory of the settlement, and the Russians will try to force Ukrainians to fall back from the settlement of Garnal. So this is the first, let's say, goal of the Russians, first task before May holidays. The Russians will try to use this situation as another media victory, that before the Victory Day and the 9th of May, the Russians managed to secure the territory of the Russian Federation. Another media victory that the Russians are planning to achieve, according to different sources and according to different insights from Kremlin, the Russians are trying and are planning to enter Dnipro region. So this is another victory, another media victory that the Russians want, Russians leader Putin, authorities want to represent to civilians and to people of Russia, that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to enter another region, and this is going to be the Dnipro region. So very interesting. As for now, we see that the Russians are very close to this victory, because according to information we have, the distance, for example, from the settlement of Bogdanovka to the border between the regions is already less than 5 kilometers. As for the settlement of Kotlarovka, the distance between this village and the border is less than 3 kilometers. So obviously the Russians are able to finish this mission during the next 2 weeks, and most likely this is exactly what the Russians are planning to do. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians are about to begin offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Bogatyr, which is also located on the way towards the border between Dnipro and Donetsk regions. As for the 24th of April of 2025, we have this video where we can see how the Russians were dropping different lists and lists where the Russians were suggesting the Ukrainian soldiers on the territory of this village to surrender. And usually the Russians do this always before the beginning of another major offensive operation. We saw the same picture in the city of Ugledar before the beginning of the battle for Ugledar. We saw the same picture and the same video almost in the area of Bakhmut, Klishchevka, and many other towns and settlements all over the entire line of combat contact. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Kibban direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. As for the previous 24 hours, we had another, let's say, batch of icons with flags that confirms Russian progress on the ground. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources, which is very important, confirmed that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish control over at least 50% of the settlement of Tarasovka. The Russians reported about this yesterday, and the Russians even published this video where we can see a Russian soldier that was waving with the Russian flag almost in the most northern part of this village. Based on this report and based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we colored this territory in Russian favor yesterday. As for the 24th of April, probably today is the first day since the battle for this pocket when we have added lots of icons with flags, but when we haven't made even a single adjustment on map. Because today we got lots of icons, but most of them basically confirmed Russian progress that was stated by the Minister of Defense. But despite this fact, we have one important video, this video. And in this video, for example, we can see that the Russians were bombing and attacking the positions of the armored force of Ukraine to the south of the settlement by the name of Alexandra Kalinova. And telling the truth, and if we increase the numbers of days, for example, since the 1st of January of 2025, we're gonna see that this is one of the videos, almost the first video when the Russians were bombing the positions of the armored force of Ukraine with artillery along the main supply line. So we see that almost nothing from this territory. Lots of strikes were made by aviation, by drones, and this is almost the first video when the Russians try to show us that now they have possibilities to attack this area. We're talking about this, let's say, the settlement of Yablunovka, Alexandra Kalinova, and N20 road, which means that the Russians have everything they need to attack the main logistic hub and the main logistic intersection of roads. This is very important, and we believe that during the next days we're going to receive more and more videos exactly from this square, and all these videos will tell us just about one thing. The Russians established complete control over the logistic of Ukrainian forces in this region, and this is going to be the sign that the operational encirclement of the armored forces of Ukraine in this pocket is about to be established by the Russians. As for now, there are still very heavy clashes for Novopavlovka and Serebryanka. The Russians are trying to advance in this direction as well. Now let's talk about the Chasiv Yar or the Slaviansk direction. We have lots of icons, as you can see, but this one probably the most important. This video was published today by the Russian sources, and here we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Minkovka. In this video we can see Russian attack these territories with tossed flamethrower systems. Usually after another tossed flamethrower strike, the Russians begin offensive, and usually nothing can survive after such pressure. So we expect some attempts from the Russian side to attack the settlement of Minkovka in the very near future. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Lyman direction. As for this direction, as you can see, we got a lot of icons and a lot of geolocations during the previous 24 hours. And there are several of them that I would like to point your attention to. For example, this video is very important. And in this video, we can see how the Russians, as a result of reconnaissance operation, managed to discover another camp or another base of some Ukrainian unit in the vicinity of the city by the name of Lyman. And when the Russians discovered positions of the armored forces of Ukraine, they began bombing and attacking this territory. This video is very important because the Russians basically destroyed operational reserves of the armored forces of Ukraine that Ukrainians most likely planned to use with the purpose to stabilize the situation in the vicinity of the settlements of Lyman, Zarechne and Tarskoye. And as you can see from this area, we also got lots of videos. We got a lot of videos of how the Russians were pummeling this territory, how the Russians were reducing this territory to ruins. We expect that due to this video and due to all these episodes that the Russians are planning to begin offensive operation in the direction of Lyman, and most likely the Russians are about to finish the battle for the settlement of Redkadub, or the Russians are planning to begin offensive in the direction of Lyman without ending the battle for Redkadub, because the Russians also have some timings. Another important video, or two videos, are coming from the Serebryanka forest. Here we can see once again at source flamethrower strikes. on the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the forest. This is very important because now we see that the Russians have almost no problems to attack Ukrainians with tall flamethrower systems. You know that tall flamethrower systems have a range of just 6 kilometers, which means that they need to keep these systems very close to the line of combat contact. And you know that if you keep units and artillery systems very close to the line of combat contact, this means that you are at risk of being attacked by Ukrainian FPV drones. But we see almost every single week 2, 3, 4, 5 videos from the forest, which means that the Russians most likely found a solution how to secure those flamethrower systems against Ukrainian drones attacks. So we believe that the Russians by these attacks are trying to basically burn everything in this part of the forest with the purpose to take complete control over this territory and to get as close as possible to the city of Siversk from the north. So we see that there is a very huge activity of the Russians, and this is another area. So the Konstantinovka and the Lyman direction are probably we see the biggest activities from the Russian side. As for the north in Kupiansk direction, nothing special happened during the previous 24 hours. Several videos were published by the Russian sources how they were bombing the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the vicinity of the settlement of Barova, and how the Russians destroyed several positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the area of the city of Kupiansk, as for now without any changes on the ground. The city of Kharkiv. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the settlement, as the same time the Russians were bombing the city of Kiev, the city of Zhytomyr, Kryvyi Rog and Dnipro. And now we see another batch of explosions from the territory of the city of Kharkiv, where the Russians were trying to destroy as many as possible of warehouses, ammo depots, and different facilities that Ukrainians used to use for military purposes. As for the northern direction, this is the place where the Russians are planning to get another media victory, and we have this video. In this video we can see how the Russians discovered the concentration of the armored forces of Ukraine, and the Russians, when they discovered positions of Ukrainian forces, began bombing and attacking this territory. And this is very important because after another, let's say, strike, after another episode how the Russians discovered Ukraine base and destroyed, we expect activization or intensified of Russian activities along the line of combat contact. Once again, in 2 weeks, according to Russian goal and task, they need to clear the Sudzha and Kursk regions completely, before the 9th of May. Another very important video we got from the northern part of Ukraine, from the northern Chernigov area. This is very important video because in this video we can see very, very heavy consequences of clashes for this settlement. In this video we can see that the entire village was almost reduced to ruins. As for now, it's very difficult to understand whether this, let's say, destruction of the settlement came due to, let's say, some fire or something like this, or there are very heavy clashes right now on the territory of this village. And this is very important because during the previous months we got several updates that the Russians are very active along the Chernigov border, and maybe this is already some proof or evidence that currently there are very heavy clashes for this settlement, and that the Russians are trying to take this territory under complete control, because entering Chernigov region could be also used by the Russians and Kremlin as another media victory in this war. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.